I grew up in a very religious family with very religious parents. I went to a Presbyterian church every week, went to my church youth groups, youth ministries, summer camps, you name it, I probably did it growing up. My parents cared a lot about putting faith in my life, which I appreciated and understood the value of, but as I got older, it began to feel like more of a task or obligation. I still felt very religious myself and thought I had strong faith, but now the problem was that I didn't need to prove it in any way because of all the things I was doing non-voluntarily or because I was pressured into it. In high school, I lived without a sense of worry because I felt like I was doing enough. I didn't need to care as much about how I acted because I was doing all the things that I was told to do, and at the end of the day, I could just cruise through life on the same path and be just fine. Now looking back at that time, I realized that I didn't have a great understanding of how sin and my everyday actions affected my relationship with God. Towards the end of my senior year of high school, I realized that once I got to college, I was going to have complete freedom over this part of my life. I was expecting to get to college and maybe go a few weeks without going to church, enjoy sleeping in on Sundays, and then start going on a pretty common basis. Then you know how the story goes. A couple weeks turns into a couple months and so on. Long story short, I didn't go to church a single time freshman year, and I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I picked up and read a Bible. I had basically completely abandoned my faith. I only prayed when I needed something, or sometimes after something really, really great happened in my life. And I'd fallen victim to the culture of Greek life and college in general that my parents had warned me about so many times. I was careless with my relationships, with how I talked, how I treated others, and how I treated my own body. When writing this testimony, I was reminded of 1 Corinthians 6, verses 19 through 20, which goes, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you were bought at a price. Therefore honor God with your bodies." But at this point in my life, I was my own, and I was enjoying it. My natural inhibitions ceased to exist, and my ego was in control of my every action. Whether it's how much alcohol I drank, the language I used, how I used hookup culture to treat women as trophies or achievements, and everything in between, I was constantly looking for one more reason to feel like I was better or more popular than the person next to me. But ironically, this just left me wanting more every single time. I was ultimately idolizing all the things in life that were bringing me pleasure and short-term happiness, and completely avoiding things that could bring me joy and fulfillment. I still talked about faith with my friends every once in a while, and I loved considering myself to be a good Christian and having strong faith. But I was really lying to myself. One argument I would always use when debating with my friends was, what if you died tomorrow? Where do you think you would go? Heaven or hell? But deep down, I didn't think anything like that would ever happen to me. So I decided I would put Christianity in my back pocket and revisit it whenever it would become convenient for me. Maybe if something bad happens to me, maybe in a few years, maybe once I'm married and have children, then I can start acting like a Christian. James chapter 2, verse 26 says, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead." Now I had read this verse before and thought about it a decent amount, but like I said, I was going to save the deeds for later. I wanted to enjoy college while I was here, and at the end of the day, it was only 4 years of my life, so it didn't seem like that big of a deal. Ironically, this is the part of my story where God decided to give me a wake-up call. In April of 2021, towards the end of my freshman year, I went on a snowboarding trip to Mammoth with a few friends. On the last day of the trip, I took a hard fall that knocked the breath out of me. I laid there at the top of the mountain for a few minutes to regain my breath, but when I finally sat up, the pain in my stomach didn't go away. I made it down to the bottom of the mountain where I went to get checked out by the paramedic. After a few minutes, he decided it was probably a bruised rib or something, and that I should just go home and get some rest. So I went back to the cabin, popped a few Advil, and called it a day. After being back at the cabin for a while, I went downstairs and lied down on my bed to take a nap. Right before I fell asleep, I decided to get up and use the bathroom. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hallway with my friends standing over me, one of them being Tyler, who's here tonight, telling me that they heard my body hit the floor from all the way upstairs, and that an ambulance was on the way. I tried standing up and immediately lost consciousness again. Within a few minutes, I was in the ambulance and then in the hospital getting MRIs done. I knew something was seriously wrong, but I didn't know how serious. Then all the information flooded in. My spleen was completely destroyed. I was internally bleeding and I had already lost 2 liters of blood. That's about 40% of the average person's total blood, and already more than enough to die from. To add on to that, the mix of alcohol and Advil in my body was making me bleed at an abnormally fast pace. And because it was a very small hospital, and also the only one in a 3-hour radius, they were very under-equipped for the emergency surgery that it required. The doctor told me 2 things. 1, that I only had a few minutes before the internal bleeding would kill me. And 2, that because of the nature of the procedure, it wasn't unlikely that it would kill me as well. He told me I had exactly 1 minute to call my family before they started. So I called my parents and my brothers and spoke to them for what I thought would be the last time. I was weeping uncontrollably and telling them, I love you, I'm scared, and I don't want to die. After getting off the phone, I immediately started praying harder than I've ever prayed before, begging God to save me. I was in the position I thought I would never be in myself, and now I had to face the same question I would ask others. Where would I go, heaven or hell? In that moment, I was sure I was going to die, and I was sure I was going to hell. There was nothing I could do now but pray and hope for a miracle. Everything was now in God's hands. They rushed me through the halls of the hospital and into the operating room. All of a sudden, the sedative kicked in and everything went black. And then I woke up. I had never been more shocked, excited, joyful, and thankful at the same time. God had answered my prayers when I least expected it. God answered my prayers when I least expected it and showed me mercy when I least deserved it. First thing I remember doing after coming to was going on my phone and opening up my Bible app. I hadn't opened up the app in months, but it just happened to open up to James chapter 1. And the first thing I read went as follows. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. To me, I truly don't think there could have been a single better or more connecting verse to that moment than I could have read in the entire Bible. I immediately knew that seeing this verse was definitely not a coincidence, and that God was showing me that this trial in my life, this moment where I was so close to losing everything, and miraculously beat the odds, was a testing of my faith. After being so close to death, having life meant something different. I now knew that I had a purpose, I just didn't know what it was. When I finally recovered and got back to school the following semester, it prompted changes in my life, but only incremental changes. And while they weren't life-changing by any means, they allowed me to live out my faith more than before. But I soon realized it was still hard to avoid doing the same things that all my friends around me were doing, and the most uncomfortable struggle was the idea of going against the grain of what's normal in college. I struggled with the fact that I knew I needed to live differently, but I still had no desire to. I had a repetitive prayer that God would not just make me more faithful, but that He would make me want to be more faithful. But nothing really changed immediately. Even though it might have happened less commonly, I was still falling victim to the same things I had done before, and I was slowly forgetting about the accident where I was so clearly saved by God's grace alone. Then about a month into the next semester, my roommate, Colin, who's also here tonight, was invited to a Bible study, mentioned it to me too, so we both decided to go. And I loved it. The first thing I realized was how much I enjoyed going to something like this when I wasn't being forced to or felt obligated to in any way. And while talking about the Bible and different aspects of faith was very important, the most valuable part of the Bible study by far was the community of people I found. It showed me that there are people just like me, people that believe in God, but that also face the exact same struggles as I do, and are imperfect just like me. It helped me understand that it's obviously hard to avoid the traps that are so normalized and even glorified in college, but it's just as important to realize that it's ignorant and stupid to expect perfection. And if you do expect perfection, you're just setting yourself up for failure, disappointment, and resentment. Continuing to go to this Bible study not only gave me a more comforting view of faith in college, but more importantly gave me a stronger confidence in sharing it with others. Community has been the cornerstone of my faith in the past few months at USC. Since starting Greek IV only a month ago, I feel like I've already deepened that community, which has then deepened my faith even more. My encouragement to all of you is to recognize that this community, these friendships, this shared faith is a gift. Matthew chapter 18, verses 19 through 20 says, "Again, truly I tell you, that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. Being able to understand this, the value of community and God's presence within it, means that we shouldn't just be excited to be with our community, that we should be excited to share it too. So that's my story. After coming out of surgery, I said I knew I had a purpose, but I didn't know what it was. Well, now I think I've found my purpose, or at least part of it. Spreading the community of Jesus Christ through the confidence and faith that God has given me, and encouraging others to do the same. Like I said before, I'm still far from being perfect, and I know that I never will be. But with this community I've found, the shared faith that God has put in my life, I don't just feel more comfortable living out my faith, but I feel more motivated too. So I'll end with one final verse that I found while writing this testimony. I think it's a great encouragement to people who might share a similar struggle as I do. But it can also resonate with anyone, no matter where they are in their faith journey. All I ask is that you listen to these words and think about how you can use them in your own life. Joshua 1, verse 9 says this: "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Thank you.